In today's project, we'll learn a few essential tools for your After Effects workflow. First, we'll practice the basics of removing, or keying, a green screen or other background. Next, we'll get our feet wet with After Effects' particle generating plugin, CC Particle World. And finally, we'll continue our exploration into color correction by using masks. Once inside After Effects, import the project folder. I've included a leaf with a white background, as well as a few autumn scenes to choose from. To get started, go to Composition, New Composition, or hit Command-N on your keyboard. Title your project, and set the resolution to 1920 by 1080 pixels. For this project, 10 seconds is just fine. Hit OK. Rather than begin with the comp we just made, let's make a secondary comp from the leaf. To do this, just drag the leaf onto the Create New Composition button, and a new comp will open. We need to remove the white to give this image a transparent background. This can be achieved easily in Photoshop, but these next few steps are just as easy, and you won't even have to leave After Effects. First, add Linear Color Key. Linear Color Key identifies and removes color tones, leaving a transparent background. This is an entry-level effect that may not be suited for difficult situations, but it's just right for today. Let's tell After Effects to key out the greens. You could key out the white, but I'm going to pair this effect with another one later, and I want you to see them both. So grab the eyedropper and choose a green. Linear Color Key did a decent, but not perfect, job of keying out our image, so we need to expand the search and identify additional greens. To do this, choose the eyedropper with the plus sign. Sample from a remaining green area, like from the stem. That should do it. We've keyed out the greens, but we actually wanted to erase the white. To do this, add the Invert effect. In Effects and Presets, invert the alpha channel. In other words, flip-flop the see-through and non-see-through areas. There's still a bit of a fringe around the leaf, so let's clean it up with Simple Choker. Simple Choker shrinks or expands an image's border by fractions of a pixel. Increase the choke mat until you remove the remaining border. If you've eaten into the stem, you've gone too far. Your settings may vary, but 2 pixels should be plenty for today's project. Return to the project panel and drop the leaf comp into the main timeline. Shut off the visibility. Choose any autumn scene and drop it above the leaf. Scale up or down as needed. Before we can add our particle generator, we need a solid layer to hold it. So go to Layer, New, Solid, or hit Command-Y on your keyboard. Name it Particles, and make the color black. Hit OK. In the Effects and Presets, search for CC Particle World, and add it to the black solid. Scrub forward to see Particle World in action. This effect generates particles that we can manipulate and animate according to a huge number of variables. At first glance, this effect may seem limited in application, but, like fractal noise, it has limitless possibilities when you understand it fully. You can create smoke, fire, dust, tornadoes, and thousands of other animations and effects. Particle World is far too dense to cover completely today, so we'll just hit the basics. But please feel free to experiment with sliders and elements that I don't discuss in class or this video. This effect simulates 3D space, but it's actually still a 2D layer. For that reason, there's no need to worry about setting our composition to 3D. You can toggle the grids and guides to see where the particles will generate, and what direction they'll move. This grid is useful if you want to make the particles interact with the floor of your environment, as we'll see later. The birth rate dictates how many particles are generated per second. Longevity specifies how long the particles last before disappearing. Producer allows you to manipulate the position of the generator as well as the simulated 3D space where the particles are allowed to live. Today, we're creating leaves blowing gently across the forest. For that, I'll increase the x-axis to spread them out horizontally, the y-axis for height, and the z-axis for depth. Play with these settings to find what looks good to you, but remember that you can always adjust them later. Under Effects, you'll find about a dozen ways for the particles to emit from the generator. They all have their uses, but today, direction axis is the best starting point. Velocity changes the speed at which the particles move along the x-axis, so today, this will change how fast the leaves are blowing in the wind. Gravity and resistance affect how quickly and easily the particles fall. Moving the gravity down and the resistance up will make it look like the leaves are falling slowly and even floating on the wind. Changing velocity to a negative number will blow the particles from the opposite direction, and doing so for gravity makes the particles shoot upward. Floor allows you to specify how the particles interact with the ground, if at all. Particles can bounce, stick, glide across, or pass right through the floor. You can choose whatever you like for this project, but I made my leaves gently bounce across the ground. Under Particle, you can choose a different shape or texture for your particle. By default, it's set to line. Today, change this value to Textured Quad Polygon. When you do this, the particles disappear, even when you scrub through the timeline. That's because Textured Quad Polygon requires you to tell After Effects where to look for the particles. To do that, just click Texture Layer and select the leaf pre-comp that we dropped in the timeline earlier. From here, play with the remaining values so you get comfortable with how the effect works. We'll cover more elements later, but you may want to adjust the birth and death sizes, which affect particle size when they're generated and when they disappear, as well as size variation, which will keep your leaves from looking too uniform. I also increased the max opacity to 100%, so the leaves didn't look see-through. Turn the forest image's visibility back on. Watch how the leaves fit into this world. If you're not happy with their size, speed, or distribution, you can return to Particle World to alter these settings at any time. When you're ready to move on, we'll fix the colors. Open the leaf pre-comp and add the tint effect. This remaps an image to grayscale based on the value of each tone in the image. To make this green leaf look like it belongs in the fall, remap the colors to ochres and oranges and yellows. I can also decrease the tint amount so it blends with the original layer. For the final stage of today's project, we need to color correct the scene. Like always, you can go for a realistic or stylized effect, just so long as you understand how and why you get where you end up. I'll quickly walk through my process, but don't try to copy my settings. Rather, experiment until you find what you want. Since my tinted leaves match the scene already, I can make any subsequent color correction affect both the leaf particles as well as the forest, and they'll change in unison. Thinking back in our Photoshop days, we can remember that adjustment layers affect all layers beneath them in the layer stack. I quickly create an adjustment layer by hitting Option Command Y. For me, this image was overwhelmingly yellow, so I begin by adding the hue saturation effect. We've previously seen that altering the channel range can shift color tones along the color wheel. But remember, going too far will give you something kind of crazy. Since I knew this image was too yellow, I isolated the yellow channel and brought the saturation and lightness down. Remember, this is only affecting the yellows. I also slid the hue slightly to shift the yellow toward orange. I brought down the red saturation significantly and shifted the red channel as well. Next, I added the curves effect, which should be very familiar from our Photoshop days. I brought down the darker ends of the scale and increased the lights to bring back some contrast that I lost by desaturating the yellows. This increased the saturation too much, so I brought the main channel saturation down as well, using the hue saturation effect. By toggling the adjustment layer, notice how far a couple of quick effects have taken the image from its original state. Finally, I want a vignette, so I added a new adjustment layer. if I added this vignette to my current adjustment layer, it would have masked out my color correction, which I don't want. To add a mask, select the adjustment layer. Go to the Shape tool and choose Ellipse. Draw out an ellipse however large you want your vignette to be. I dropped a curves adjustment on the mask layer and brought the exposure down considerably. I hit the disclosure triangle next to my mask and changed the type from Add to Subtract. This inverted the mask. There's still a hard edge along the mask which is very unsightly, so I feathered it until it looks smooth. Remember, today's project has 3 parts. First, successfully keying out the green using linear color key, invert, and simple choker. Second, manipulating the leaf particles using CC Particle World. And finally, color correcting the image to make the scene suit your tastes. Have fun experimenting with Particle World, and think of other examples of how this powerful effect can help you bring your artistic vision to life.